What's up, Gear Mortals? Trey, Xavier here, and on today's edition of Gear God's Quality Control, we're going to be comparing literally two metal zones. So recently, Boss came out with the MT2W, which is the Wazacraft version of the MT2 Metal Zone pedal, which needs no introduction. It's very likely that you bought one, as I did early on in your guitar formative years, and couldn't really figure out how to get the tone out of it that you were looking for. It definitely has plenty of gain, and if you know how to dial it in and use it right, it sounds awesome. But as a young noob, I got it because it had the most distortion. I sucked, so I just cranked it all the way up. And I never really got it to sound the way that I wanted it to. But then, lo and behold, the internet brings the good tidings that if you use the MT2 as a preamp pedal and skip the preamp part of your amp and just go straight into like the return of the effects loop, it sounds glorious. And that's what we're doing today. But we're gonna compare the new Metal Zone with the old Metal Zone. So the question on your mind is probably the same one that I have. Why would they make a new one, and what are the differences? We're gonna find out today. So if we just take a look at the face of these pedals, the only thing that I can see differently, aside from the bit of dust that's on my older one, is we've got the Wazacraft logo right into the foot switch. We've got a W, MT2W, and then there's this switch. There's an S and a C. Normally, I'm not one to read the manual unless it's something that I just can't figure out intuitively. But for this one, I had to know what's the S and the C. So according to the manual, it stands for standard and custom. So the standard, of course, is the classic Metal Zone sound. And then C is this new mode, a new signal path, some new circuitry, something that's been tweaked to change the sound of the Metal Zone. On top of that, the standard mode, which is the classic Metal Zone sound, has also been tweaked a little bit. So what you heard in the beginning was me playing first the original Metal Zone, and then the new Metal Zone, but with the standard setting. So all the other settings on the two pedals are identical so that we can control for just what's going on inside the pedal and hear the differences specifically. For one thing, Boss claims that the Wazacraft version is quieter than the original, and that's something that we can easily test right here. So here's the original. I'm gonna switch them. So it seems to me, at identical settings, the Wazacraft one is significantly quieter. Not to the point where, like, you know, you have to throw out your old one and get this new one just because it's quieter. But I also noticed that the tone is different. Out of the three different sounds that we have now, the original, the new original, and the custom, for heavy stuff, I actually like the new original the best. The Wazacraft version on the standard setting, I liked a lot. Of course, the most significant difference on the new Metal Zone is this custom and standard switch. So I'm gonna switch between the two, and you're gonna hear right away how drastically different these two sounds are. So here's standard mode. Here's custom. We actually lose a little bit of high end in the custom mode. It sounds a bit fatter to me in the mid-range, sort of a more rounded low mids, and just a scotch of high end taken away. To me, that makes it much more suitable for like lead guitar stuff. It's not quite as harsh in the high end, and it's a bit fatter and rounder, which for me is something that I like better for leads. And then it's also a little bit more rock and roll and less metal, I think. Just like having that sort of rounder, woofier sound works really well for like kind of like a hard rock, more classic rock kind of a sound, and not so vicious, high-end, brutal death metal. For example, I'll play you my finest dad riff. Once again, the sound you're hearing is just the guitar, straight into the Metal Zone, into a DI, right into my Apollo Twin, into Pro Tools, and then I'm using 2 notes, wall of sound with the power amp modeling turned on, and then one of my own cab IRs. As pure of a signal chain as you can get here. Here's what it sounds like with some lead guitar. And then here's standard mode. Back to custom. And then here's the original. So as you can hear, the original and standard modes on the new one have sort of a high-end thing that doesn't really play that well with leads. Almost has a little bit of like a cocked wah sound that I don't really like for lead guitar, but the custom mode really smooths it out and just it kind of does it for me. Sexually. I found that the Metal Zone 2 Electric Boogaloo had a ton more mix friendliness, whereas the old Metal Zone sort of tended to disappear in the mix a little bit. If you were using it as your primary distortion sound, it had a tendency to sort of just sit back. But the new custom mode brings it forward a bit, mellows it out a little bit. It's not quite as harsh. It's just a lot more pleasant, I think, sounding, which a lot of people like the Metal Zone because it's a little bit harsh. So what's cool to me about the new Metal Zone is that whether you liked the old sound or you want a new second sound, you've got them both on there, and even the new standard sound is a bit of an improvement over the classic pedal. I don't know exactly what it is that they did, but to me it just sits better, it's a bit clearer. The custom mode definitely improved the clarity of the pedal. No question. Even with slightly less high end, everything you play is just gonna sound more like a guitar. It's a little bit less modern, even though the advertising materials claimed that the custom mode was more modern. I actually found it to be a little more classic rock and a little less metal. But no matter what, the thing that the new Waza Craft version gives you that the original Metal Zone didn't is a choice. Now you've got 2 completely different sounds with a flip of a switch, and that, if nothing else, is well worth the increased price of the pedal. If you're a Metal Zone fanatic, you're definitely going to want to get the MT2W, if for no other reason that it's just a more boutique version of the pedal that you love. And the fact that it has a completely new mode in it, it's kind of like finding a new room in the Great Pyramid. It's a whole new realm of sounds for you to explore, because it's not just the switch. You switch over to a new mode and then you start turning the knobs and it's a whole new universe of sounds. So that's pretty cool. For just 50 bucks more than the standard Metal Zone, that's a lot to explore. So let's try it with some lower tuned riffs and see what the difference is between the two. So here's the original sound. Here it is in custom mode. It feels to me like we lose a little tiny bit of gain when we switch over to custom mode, but that could have something to do with the fact that there is slightly reduced high end, and distortion sort of lives in the upper half of the frequency spectrum, so it might just sound a little bit less gainy. Here's the gain all the way up on standard mode. Here it is in custom mode. Let's try some low-tuned riffs going back and forth between the two pedals. Here's the original Metal Zone. Here's the new Metal Zone in standard mode. And here it is in custom mode. In conclusion, if you're already a fan of the Metal Zone, the Wazacraft version is just going to give you another reason to love it. If you weren't a fan of the Metal Zone before, I still highly recommend that you plug into a Wazacraft version and check it out, because it really might change the way that you feel about this pedal. For me, I definitely gained a newfound respect for the Metal Zone. I wonder what would happen if I just... Oh yeah!